Welcome to SportX, where we talk all things relating to the ever-evolving business of sport and the people that make things happen in this vibrant industry. I'm Gerrit Davids, founder of TalkX TV, where we host SportX as a content channel. Also, welcome to our Women's Month series, where we focus on the role and contribution made by women in the sector. I'm joined by Lindy-Joy Dennis, who is the current marketing and communications manager at the Two Oceans Marathon, the non-profit company. Welcome to SportX, Lindy-Joy. And let's start off by describing to us what is it that you do in the sports business industry.
Good morning, Gerrit. Thank you for having me. As the sports and marketing manager, I head up quite a large portfolio that's at the intersection of content, stakeholder management, sponsorship, and general marketing. So everything that you'd require cumulatively to generate revenue for an event and to be able to create the hype, and importantly, to deliver to your core consumer base, which in our instance would be your runner. So it's an immense privilege having this position. We are a globally iconic race. We attract more than 3,000 internationals from 89 countries in the world. And that doesn't happen without consistent brand building, not just from myself, but from the entire team, and excellence on all levels of the event.
Yeah, great. So what is a typical day like just shortly before the big race for Lindy-Joy?
Shortly before the big race, it's frenetic. It is very focused on sponsor rights delivery. Our sponsors are incredibly important, especially in my portfolio, because they are a large contributor to the revenue that makes the race possible. And that revenue could be in the form of a cash contribution. It could be in the form of a product that is needed on the event. For example, our hydration alone costs millions of rands for our runners, but we have to keep them hydrated. It could be safety. We are then talking about governmental and parastatal organizations that form part of our governing framework. It's making sure that all of them are happy. It is making sure that we are geared to give them the return on investment in exchange for what they put into the event. Very importantly, it is making sure that our consumer base, which is our runner, is well informed, is excited, is safe, and that the experience for them is the best that it can be, especially being as close to the event as it is. Typically very long days, but the more you plan, the easier it gets. I would say that no 2 days are ever the same. Events are live and dynamic, as is the nature of sport itself. So you have to be prepared for the unexpected. And as they say, just roll with it. But yes, planning does help. You must plan. As the saying goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Bearing in mind that with an event, there's a plan A, there's definitely a plan B, and preferably a plan C as well. So it is straddling a couple of different demands and requests in any given day up to race week. Very frenetic, very exciting. It's the culmination of a lot of preparation that's gone in for months and months. It does take a year to prepare for an event of this magnitude, but with the help of I am just one of a very competent core team. I don't think anybody in sporting or event organization can claim to be doing anything on their own. It simply is not the case. So yes, exciting but frenetic, I would say, are the days leading up to the race.
All the challenges sounds like stuff that can only be managed by women. Um,
I like it. Yes. Generally, they say we are better at multitasking, and that's certainly a skill that is tested to the absolute limit the closer you get to the race.
yeah, which brings us to the next question. What's your view on how more women could be upskilled to enter the sports business sector, and in particular, marketing and communications, your domain?
Gerard, I think that I must say that marketing communications, I think it's naturally a domain that women excel at, and in general, I get what you're saying, but I don't necessarily like to talk about women being upskilled in sport because it's almost it presents a concession review that women have to be
Mm,
allowed into this hallowed arena that is sport, and that they have to overcome a certain inherent disadvantage by
mm,
virtue of biology, which I don't really think is the case. um, but I think that sport on the whole, the view has to change that it is a man's domain. So it's a holistic approach to involving more women. So the more we're going to see women athletes excel at elite level, which we're seeing women overtaking men, in those fields. Look at our very own Gerda Steyn. Her record, is greater than the record of any male in running. Or if you look
yeah,
at Simone Biles at the moment, the goat in
yeah, yeah.
gymnastics. If we look at the fact that women commentary is more prevalent than ever before, but I would say again we want to see those voices in commentary, for example, coming in not just in a sport
Mm,
that is considered soft or for women. So we don't only want to hear it in gymnastics or swimming. We want to hear
mm,
more of that in, say, the likes of rugby.
yeah.
So we want to see pro athletes being taken as seriously as male pro athletes, with regard to equal pay as much as possible. Yes, I do believe there has to be a return on investment as well. So, building that audience there is key. Getting the broadcast exposure for those female athletes is key. And once we dispel with the notion that sport itself is more geared towards men on all different touch points, we're going to find it more accepting of women and easier for women to break through different barriers.
Yeah, great. So, talking about preparing yourself for the next phase of your career, your background being having been qualified in law, then on to primarily in the publishing industry, being a managing editor of sorts, and then now currently find yourself in marketing and communications, which I would think that that qualification and that past experience uh, is perfectly primed to do what you're doing.
Thank you, Gerard. I think I've been fortunate, yes, in that I've been able to have that career trajectory, which has seen me end up here. Because yes, it lays the foundation for all the core skills that you are going to need. You need very incisive, clear, and agile communication skills, not just with your core audience, but with your stakeholders, with your sponsors. You need the ability to rationalize very clearly, to build a case, for example, for a marketing proposal. Why should you be onboarded with us as a sponsor versus your competitor? You need those analytical skills, deductive reasoning. But I think in my case, it certainly wasn't. I never envisaged that I would necessarily end up here. So, I would say that for anybody, the sky is the limit, because the good thing about where we are in the year 2024 and this era is that I think more and more employees are recognizing the power of cross skill population and pollination. So there's no such thing anymore as working in a silo. These days, we have medical doctors who work in the corporate field, and nobody is asking them anymore, why are you not a GP or a surgeon?
Yeah.
So I, one of the barriers that I've had along the way is always been asked the question that if you studied law, why should I hire you in this field? But as the years have gone on, that's now become irrelevant because your skill set speaks for itself, and what you were able to then draw from that suitcase and apply in this context should speak for itself. And I think it's when if you're faced with a future employer who has doubts, then maybe that is a red flag to you as well, because you want a certain open-mindedness where you work, and a recognition that you have more to offer, not less, by virtue of maybe having come from a little bit out of the box to where you are now.
I'm happy you focus on the skill sets, in the suitcase, or in the bouquet of skills. And it's all about competency that leads to
Yes,
proficiency, irrespective of the kind of job you do. Because I wanted to ask
correct.
you about identifying one or two core skills that you or a person would require, being involved in marketing and communications and dealing with sponsorships, and the like, because there's also a legal aspect to it and having to understand the rights and obligations of a sponsorship deal.
That is spot on, Gerrit. That's probably the more serious and demanding part of the job. You have to be able to put together a decent proposal within a core framework, speaking to what you can give the sponsor at a certain level, right? So without compromising your sponsor matrix, but also bearing in mind that one glove is never going to fit everyone. So you need to then be able to tailor and make a contract bespoke according to a certain sponsor's needs. Sponsor one has as their primary objective maybe brand awareness, and maybe sponsor
Hmm.
two has as their primary objective engagement. Those are two similar but different things, and I'm making a very superficial example, and you need to be able to tell each of them how you are going to deliver, but within the constraints of perhaps you're giving me the same amount of revenue and I have only so many rights to give away.
Yeah.
So you have to apply your mind. You have to have financial acumen. You have to have a sense of deductive reasoning, logic, agility, and the ability to self upskill all the time. I think that if you are somebody that is not fond of self growth and learning, in this field, which is always evolving, it's maybe not the best thing because it is never static. So
Hmm.
you have different concepts that are sometimes difficult to grasp. I myself have sometimes found that at certain points, the leap from A to B, as you have to acquire a different skill, is quite steep. There are always people that are willing to help if you just ask. But it starts with you saying, show me how this is done, give me the basic framework, and then being hungry to investigate further and really master the skill yourself. So I think resilience is key. I think the hunger to grow, agility, but I don't see my law degree as an inhibiting factor or something that is strange. I see it as something that has armed me to be able to certainly, deconstruct what it is I need to do in a given sponsorship environment. But as I must emphasize, the learning is ongoing.
No, that is what I wanted to ask you next, but I have full appreciation of where you're coming from in terms of your legal background, because I am in the same situation, having studied law, and I'm doing something totally different. Not
Wonderful.
really totally different, but I mean, the skill set always comes to your rescue if you have a
Correct.
legal background. Yeah, always.
Correct.
It always
Yes.
does, yeah. So now talking about the once again about the career advice, looking back at your own career path, what advice would you give to someone entering the sector in terms of the demands and balancing life and work, etc.?
I think that you can't get away from the fact that it is more demanding on you personally than other environments may be. So you need to enjoy what you do. And fortunately for me, I do enjoy what I do. I do love the sporting environment. I adore my runners. I love the fact that no 2 days are the same, and that the tasks are so varied. So there's always mental stimulation. I think that you must, very importantly, especially for us women, considering that it's Women's Month, the research has shown that we are more prone as women to imposter syndrome than men. So I think as women, we really need to dispel of that notion of not being good enough, or having this kind of imposter syndrome, I'll fake it till I make it. Own the fact that you are good enough, especially if you constantly do the research, if you constantly try to deliver. And when you don't know, you ask. I've never seen a male who knows it all, but I have seen men who make sure that they surround themselves with the best, who ask, who make it their business to learn. And as women, we need to do the same thing. We need to adopt the same mindset, and not sit with imposter syndrome and know that we're good enough. We also need to understand that we bring a different skill set, maybe, sometimes not the same, and that the way we do things is also good enough. You may come with a more sophisticated approach in a certain contract environment or bartering environment. You may have better soft skills. Those are not lesser skills to to what a male may bring. Being detail oriented is not inferior to perhaps seeing the bigger picture. So I always say we need to focus on what we do and do it well as well. And I think women are really breaking through in terms of traditional stereotypes. They're just shattering that. I'm seeing more and more women in operations and in parts of event organization and sport that would formerly have been unthinkable. So I think it's a very exciting era to be entering the field. I think you must just bear in mind that yes, there are going to be times when the hours are demanding. You're not going to get away from that. You must believe in yourself, constantly upskill, don't have imposter syndrome, and ask for help when you need it. Lean into that help. It's important.
Sage advice there, Lindy-Joy. Did you have mentors, and how do you view their importance in your career?
I think all of us have one or two people that we look up to, or who set the bar and made it less frightening or aspirational. In my current work environment, I'm very lucky. We've had a vice chairperson and a chairperson who are women. And it's the first time we've had that in the history of our organization. And I stand corrected, but I think it's unique so far in the history of local big events. So there was a glass ceiling right there that was shattered. And these ladies are knowledgeable, they come with experience, and they are captains of industry in their own field. So it is no token appointment, And then I've had event organizers that are women that are chief financial officers, chief marketing officers that have done the job brilliantly and dispelled with the notion that this is so-called a male level of expertise. That certainly helped, and they were always there to give a helping hand, encouragement, and course correction when needed. I think course correction is such an underrated thing. You must be grateful when it comes, because somebody doesn't need to invest their time in you to teach you a better way of doing something. So I'm very grateful for the correction that I've had in my life also. But if I had to single out one particular mentor, I would say it would have been way back in the day in the 2010s, there around 2008, when I first landed at Media 24, there was a lady
Mm.
called Ismarie Vademan, and she was a phenomenon, a tour de force on itself. She was our sort of editor in chief of absolutely everything at weekly magazines. But more than that, she was the managing director, and she became the first CEO of Media 24. At the time, it was
Mm.
unprecedented, and she took no prisoners as a woman. So she didn't have any deference to men or any sense of being inferior, but at the same time, she did not compromise the fact that she was a woman or her femininity, which I thought was important, because sometimes you see women have to step into a male arena or a male role, and they take on the male psyche. They start dressing like males, and they become filled with testosterone. So I don't. She was a great example because she showed us that she could step into male steps in a way that had not been done before in the industry,
Mm.
without sacrificing everything that she did have as a woman and her femininity, and that was a first. So it was great. Yeah, she was tough on us, but again, the tough things in life propel you from A to B.
Yeah, as a media observer myself and what's happening in the publishing world, I seem to remember her tenure as was it MD of
Yes, yes,
magazine.
that's
At,
correct, Gerard.
yes,
Fabulous. Yes, yes.
yeah. So you must have had a very good mentor in her. You speaking so fondly of her. But let's move on. So, as a person involved in an environment which throws a lot of challenges at you, and part of that challenges would be the future. How would you navigate and become future fit for the future within your own current environment? So, what are the biggest trends that you see emerging on the horizon, where you sit in what you do in that ecosystem?
Gerard, I think we could talk about that for days. You ask difficult questions, and I'm just going to unpack on a top level, because I think, again, I think it's quite a layered question. More than ever, we are in a space where things evolve from month to month. Because of the onslaught of digital AI and all these ancillary technologies, right? So I think future proofing really starts with being agile as a marketer and as somebody that looks at what the skills are required in your field. I think short form video content is here to stay, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very important, very influential. And for me, I think it's driven by Gen Z. So in a
Mm.
nutshell, when I spend a lot of time with my godchildren looking at what they're assimilating, how they're getting new information, and how they're reacting to it, because I think whether we like it or not, Gen Z have become a very influential driver. Whether they're your core vertical, your core audience or not,
Mm.
their ripple effect is felt all the way through. If we just look at what's happening in the American election right now,
Yeah.
and you ignore them at your own peril, but
Mm.
and don't be afraid of them. You have to get to grips with what is happening at the coal face of where technology is meeting content, is meeting the
Mm.
consumer, or you're going to get left behind. It doesn't mean that necessarily everything they're doing is right for your platform or your
Mm.
brand or your anything, but you need to be aware of all these different modus operandi and
Mm.
ways of interacting, reaching audiences, growing audiences, getting buy-in, and so on. And I suspect that AI will play a bigger and bigger role. I don't think we're there yet, but I think that we must be prepared to leverage AI. We don't have to be afraid of it. But if we're not going to be open and honest about the fact that
Mm.
the next frontier of digital interfacing is here. it used to be virtual reality and augmented
Mm,
reality, and many marketers were afraid of that. But there were one or two brands that interacted with that outstandingly and got the edge, you know.
mm.
So you one cannot be afraid of these rapid developments, as daunting as they are. You have to stay on top of it, and see what works for you. But you know, it starts with knowing. So knowledge is key, adaptability, and resilience.
Yeah, I like the part where you insist that the individual has to stay on top of it and not be scared or fear
Yeah,
what's coming our way. Lindy Joy, thank you very much for your time. That was Lindy Joy Dennis, who is the
been an
current
absolute
marketing.
pleasure. Thank you, Gerrit.
No, great. That was Lindy Joy Dennis, who is the current marketing and communications manager at the Two Oceans Marathon Nonprofit Company, or NPC. Thank you for your time and insights, which is very much appreciated. That is where we would leave it for now. And thank you for watching What I Do in Sport on the SportX channel, which is hosted on TalkX TV. Until next time.